Hello, how are y'all doing? My name is Taylor Foster, and I hope everyone is doing well during these difficult times as we adjust and social distance. Social distancing did affect me and my partner's preparation for the speech, but we did adjust properly. That is why I am on this platform instead of in the classroom with y'all. So today we'll be talking about communicating with African Americans. Okay? So, communicating with African Americans is not any different than communicating with any other aspect of life. But there are some key factors that you should acknowledge. First off, I want to get your attention by imagining yourself in a room full capacity of African Americans. Can you handle it? Of course you can. My thesis is communicating with African Americans can be accomplished successfully by observing parenting and mental health. Preview this. First, we will explain communication with African Americans, which is the origin of the speech. Next, we will comprehend. We will comprehend communication with African Americans, which is qualified, commendable, and a valuable disclosure. Then, we are analyzing how to communicate with African Americans, which is essential mentally. Finally, I will help y'all give, receive, and exchange communication between African Americans or with African Americans. So, I would like to talk about my main point one, which is successfully communicating with African Americans. Successful is an adjective. It is the aim or purpose while achieving popularity, profit, or distinction. There are 6 key factors to achieving successful communication with African Americans. The first key factor I would like to talk about is verbal communication between African Americans. Then I would like to talk about nonverbal communication with African Americans. Next, I would like to talk about listening communication between African Americans. Then, emotional awareness communication with African Americans is also important. Successful written communication between African Americans is important, and watching your tone through paper is very important. Successful communication in difficult situations with African Americans and understanding it can change a whole impact in reality. Contrary to common belief, African Americans have a different style of communicating than the expected norms do. This type of communication that African Americans exchange between each other, it inhibits cultural authenticity and access to power. Understanding sociolinguistics between African Americans and expected norms can prohibit improper communication. Sociolinguistics is the descriptive study of the effects of communication on society. There are 6 key factors that I would like to talk about sociolinguistics. It is ethnic sociolinguistics, religious sociolinguistics between African Americans, class status, gender, level of education, and age sociolinguistics between African Americans. Now I will pass the trophy on to Bree.